Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Armenian American Mental Health Association's 2021 conference. Today, we have a presentation on Armenian identity. I am Dr. George Gharibian, and I am the Armenian American Mental Health Association's Education and Programming co-chair. Today I'll be the discussant and also one of the presenters. But with us, we also have Monica Babaian and Zhanna Shahparonyan from California School of Professional Psychology. And they will also present different parts of the panel discussion. But in the end, hopefully we'll have some time. We'll do some discussion and we'll answer the questions that we receive from our participants through our Facebook Live. Emmy, can you please give me access to do the sharing the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so our presentation is called Armenian Identity, Intergenerational Trauma, Diasporan Guilt, and Identity Maintenance. So our first presenters will be Monica Babaian. Monica, please go ahead.
All right, can you guys see my screen? Beautiful.
Yes. Speak a little bit louder. Your voice is low, Monica.
Okay. So my name is Monica Babaian, and I am doing this presentation alongside Zhanna Shahparonyan. Our presentation is titled Diasporan Guilt Through the Lens of Identity, Life Satisfaction, and Advocacy. So throughout recent years, research has addressed, the need for activism and advocacy in these underserved, oppressed, and victimized communities. And of those communities are the Armenian Americans, especially with everything that's been going on since September 27th. The Armenian population, not only in Armenia, but the population out in the diaspora, especially here in Los Angeles, where the diaspora is almost as large as how many people actually live in Armenia. We've been victim to secondhand trauma, as you guys know. So that's a lot of what our presentation will cover. So I want to introduce the idea of diasporic guilt and helplessness and where this stems from. So diasporic guilt is this idea where it tells me that I should be doing more to help my brothers and sisters in the mainland, that I'm here, they're there, I feel so close to them, but I feel so far and I can't do anything. There's this helplessness and paralysis. And a lot of that relates to the survivor's guilt of us being here and enjoying the freedoms of America in terms of how much more we have the ability to, I guess here in America, we have more freedom. We don't feel as oppressed by, the neighboring countries. We don't feel the trauma the same way they experience it in Armenia when they have this like impending threat to their nation at any given time. And even now that the war is done, it's not really done. So when we're here, we feel this guilt, the helplessness, the confusion. We feel like we're uninformed and we want to know more. We're glued to our phones, we're glued to our screens. We feel the survivor's guilt. And then we feel like ineffective if we feel like we're not doing enough. And no matter what we do, sometimes it still feels like it's enough. So that's like the experience of the diaspora out in the public. And alongside that, there's also this idea of immigrant guilt. So even before the recent attacks of September 27th, the Armenians out in the diaspora, and this goes for many other diasporas that have situations in their homelands occurring, there's this celebration of like survival and ethnic resilience, where we want to be proud of the fact that we've made it so far, but at the same time, there's a lot of guilt and there's shame. So when people immigrate here, they migrate here, they're doing a lot of this oftentimes to help the people back at home. But there's this sense of like, why was I lucky enough to have to get to America, whereas the ones that are still there are still experiencing these things. So this largely started with the Armenian genocide and leaving the old Yergid and coming here and knowing that what's occurring there isn't occurring here, and it creates this sense of dissonance. Now, alongside that, there's this idea of preservation guilt. And preservation guilt pretty much says that we feel guilty if we don't carry forward our ethnic identity, we don't carry forward the Armenianness, but at the same time, there's guilt in not preserving it as well. So if you don't preserve it, it brings this sense of like, wow, this may be the end of the lineage if we don't teach our children how to speak Armenian, if we don't teach them to follow the traditions. But at the same time, there's this idea of if we are preserving the culture, if we are passing things down like from generation to generation, there's also a lot of trauma that we're passing down. So in terms of where diasporic guilt and helplessness really stems from, it's this idea of intergenerational trauma. So intergenerational trauma is often defined as the effects of collective traumatic events passed on to generations through psychological and biological means. And it's very possible, and research has shown that this dissatisfaction and pervasive unhappiness exists in individuals like ourselves who have this history of, you know, the massacres and all the genocides and the wars, so they call it. So these things kind of pile up and you pass them on generation to generation. So a lot of that is through epigenetics, and I want to share this picture here. So on the left, we see the intergenerational transmission when we think of it in terms of phenotypes, like something like, you know, mom and dad have brown eyes, we're going to pass down brown eyes. When it's something that's physical and tangible and something you can see, it's so much easier to understand that it's genetics, it's how genetics gets carried on. But at the same time, there's epigenetics of trauma, and the epigenetics of trauma pretty much says that despite the fact that it's something that's mental and psychological, this too can also get passed down. And what it comes down to, just like a brief description of what epigenetics is, it basically just says like changes in organisms that causes modification of gene expression rather than alterations in the genetic code itself. So even though an actual gene isn't being changed, the way that we express, the way that we understand things, the way that we see the world, the way that we experience life is changed through epigenetics and intergenerational trauma. So whether it's environmental exposures out in the world, but also like in utero, the babies are known to like experience the stress that the mothers have. And these things, like both in utero, both postnatal, these things kind of add up, and intergenerational trauma just, it keeps being spread. And it creates this idea of, you know, in our Armenian identity, if Armenian identity is said to persist into like the fourth generation, how do we make it so that this intergenerational trauma stops being passed down if things like this occur as often as they do? So this isn't the first attack that we've gotten in like the last decade, and we won't even know if it's the last one that we've gotten. So with the idea that it can carry for at least 4 generations, it begs the question of like, will there ever be a time that this stops if the actual attacks never stop? So research suggests that for Armenians in particular, an historical understanding of past trauma is an integral part of one's identity. So in therapy per se, a lot of the times there's like high dropout rates for Armenian clients. And one of the most significant reasons for that is just the idea that to really truly understand an Armenian, you have to understand their history. You have to understand the effects of the genocide. You have to understand their helplessness. You have to understand their rage and their pain and all these things, where it really makes it important to, for especially people of other races when dealing with Armenians, to really recognize this and to be comfortable speaking about it. So moving forward, this creates like a dissonance, discrepancy in how we see ourselves. So on one side of the coin, we have William Sarion's great quote that everyone has seen hundreds of times, I'm sure, for when two of them meet anywhere in the world, see if they will not create a new Armenia. So quotes like this empower us. It gives us pride. It gives us this sense of resilience that we've made it this far, being one of the oldest civilizations of mankind, alongside being like the first Christian nation. To think of like what a vast like history that is, it gives us like this really, really great sense of proudness to know that despite everything that's happened, we have made it this far. But at the same time, there's also weakness in our history. And with our history being what it is, your identity is also like different forms of different negative things how come together to really shape you. So there's things like that rage, that shame, the negative self-image, inadequacy, loss of confidence, and then what I mentioned earlier with that hesitancy of wanting to even pass this forward because you know that there's so much weakness in this culture. So it creates this battle between like the two sides of ourselves within how we see ourselves. And I decided to include this in the presentation just to give you a moment to like reflect and see what kind of feelings this evokes. So even though the war is over physically, we know that there's still things that occur every day with the prisoners of war not being returned, with false promises, with see even deeper level things like this that happen when an amusement park or exhilaration, it's like something that's so sad to look at, but at the same time they're publicly supporting armenophobia, they're teaching children to hate Armenians. So the same way that our genetics are intergenerational trauma is getting passed down, it's the same way that on the other side this hatred for Armenians is being passed down. So I would just want you guys to take a moment to just look at this and think of like the loss of dignity here and how that can really contribute to like your identity when you see things like this and you know that like we've been screaming for months and months and years and for over 100 years now, and we still don't get the public support that we want, and that's why these things may continue. So I wanted to also include findings from my dissertation. My dissertation was titled The Effects of Acculturation on Locus of Control, Life Satisfaction, and Quality of Life of Armenian American Young Adults in Los Angeles. So my study really wanted to look at whether we were happy or not, in a sense. And I found that while having higher representations of heritage culture yielded higher quality of life scores, it wasn't the same for life satisfaction. So quality of life is something that's tested through these four domains of physical, psychological, social, and environmental means. And a lot of the times, socioeconomic status contributes to being able to get the best of your environment or having a bigger social circle or getting your physical needs met, getting your medical doctor's appointments, having a car. So these things contribute to higher quality of life. The study also found that Armenians do often have higher socioeconomic status, so that was very self-explanatory. However, when we thought about why is it that in most cultures quality of life is associated with life satisfaction and these two things go up together, why was it that with Armenians, despite the quality of life, being more Armenian meant that we were less satisfied with life? So, especially now considering all the things that have occurred since September 27th, it really dawned on us the idea that to be Armenian, to feel this really close tie to your ethnic identity, means that you feel the things that your nation is going through. You feel their pain, you feel the helplessness, you feel that rage, and it just leads to a lower life satisfaction. So it just goes to show that despite having all the things, the materialistic, the goods, and all those things, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're satisfied with our lives. It doesn't necessarily translate as happiness, and this can be part of the reason why. Now, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to allow Zhanna to share so she can flip her slides herself. If it will let me. All right, you should be able to share now.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, to continue off what Monica presented to us, as imaginable, all of this can have a very negative effect on our lives, on everyone's life, and which some of this might be obvious, but again, worth sharing that individuals who struggle to overcome feelings of guilt are prone to a lot of high risk uh, illnesses, whether it's mental illnesses, whether it's physical illnesses, especially depression, anxiety, and other concerning factors. Uh, Having overwhelming amount and of unresolved amount of guilt, you might feel incredibly irritable, angry, distressed, agitated, and also remorseful. Feelings of guilt are also frequently manifested as physical symptoms, which could include having symptoms of insomnia, having trouble sleeping, or the complete opposite, oversleeping and wanting or feeling so fatigued and tired all the time. Stomach pain, gut health, that could also be part of that. Muscle tension, headaches, migraines, whatever the case is. Um, Also, this could result in lack of interest as wanting to continue doing whatever you enjoy doing daily, or attending to your job, attending to your family, attending to your kids, attending to yourself, which is a very important factor in this. Um, Also, like individuals who do have overpowering amount of guilt, they also might turn to substance abuse. We also see a lot of individuals who struggle with substance and alcohol abuse. Domestic violence within families, relationships, they also tend to increase, especially within Armenians in the diaspora. Increased feelings of anxiety, anger, depression, paranoia, a lot of mood swings, especially with everything that's been happening lately back home and not being able to attend to that, like Monica also pointed it out. It also questions your own belief, whether it's you're doing everything that you can or you're not doing enough, and also being shamed by individuals, whether it's outside the country or within the country, that you're not doing enough, you're not good enough, you're not helping. So a lot of these things do take a toll on a person. Okay. Oh, did I jump back? Sorry. Um, well, there are always a lot of ways to cope with this. And whether you're doing this as a mental health professional, whether you're doing this as a family member, to your sibling, to your friend, or just having these coping skills and working on yourself. But as a whole, encouraging ethnic minorities to engage in self-care. We, as mental health professionals, it's the phrase, it's most common use, self-care, self-care. But what does it mean in this case? So in this case, like I said, whether you're doing this for a client or you're doing this simply for yourself, is being mindful and being aware of what's going on. Meditating, that also helps you bring you to the present versus constantly living in the fear of being in the future. Engaging in activities, whether it's activities you enjoy to do, or whether it's simply as going throughout your day, really focusing on work, focusing on your schedule, building a schedule, and being with your family. That's also something that takes your mind off of these things and really brings you to the present. Having social support, whether it's talking to a friend, to a partner, to a parent, really gaining that, because chances of what you're going through, people that are around you, they're probably feeling similar emotions, they're having the same reactions. Getting involved in behavioral activation, whether it's going for a walk in the morning or going for a swim or biking or just, any behavior that also will increase your mood. There's a lot of research on this that says that exercise does increase mood as well. uh, Nutrition, being mindful of what you put inside your body, going back to the previous slide of, having uh, physical strains that it takes, like having gut health issues or having muscle tension and all of that, really understanding what you're putting into your body, nurturing your body from within and giving yourself energy to be able to carry on this throughout your day. And staying in the present, which I think especially within the past few months, that's been something very difficult, especially since the war broke out, and even if it stopped, constantly worrying about what's going to happen next, not being able to really concentrate of, okay, what's happening now? What can I do now? Always living either in the future or worrying about, oh, something happened in the past, therefore it's going to happen again. And of course, this is easier said than done, but these are some of the few important skills that we should encourage our patients and also ourselves to utilize in. Also, utilizing your given resources, whether it's seeking professional mental health, professional medical help. You know, it's one thing to talk and have a conversation with your friend, your family, but it's another to really talk to somebody who can help you through this professionally. I think it's very important, especially nowadays with social media. It's so easy to get caught up with, you know, what is so and so posting, what's going on, the news, the media outlet, and just getting so caught up in that and not really not being able to differentiate between what's actually happening, what's just being thrown out on the media, and what we are feeling, what are our reactions to this, and really getting to the bottom of that. Like I said, seeking medical help. You know, there's so many physical strains that it takes a toll on a person. Getting your weekly checkups, whether it's giving blood, whether it's getting a cardiogram, whatever the case is, taking care of yourself, because in the long run, this will help you a lot. And providing others with resources. You know, if you are in this field, you know, consulting with colleagues, whether it's, you know, giving someone the proper referral, that could easily change someone's life on that. Okay. I think this is also a big factor, whether it's to educate yourself. You know, some of us in the newer generation, or like having some elders or talking to everyone, really understanding what your culture is about, what your ethnic background is about, whether to know about history, understanding history, what happened over 100 years ago, what's happening now, you know, being up to date with current events, but also being able to differentiate what's thrown out there to you know, throw you off the tracks and what is actually accurate. Talking to family members, understanding your cultural values, like, why are we the way we are? Why are we so collectivist? Where does that stem from? Why is it so painful for us individuals in the diaspora? Why are we taking this so difficultly of what's happening back home? You know, that all stems from somewhere. Understanding your beliefs. Why do I think the way that I do? You know, is it just me, or why is my mom, my grandma, why are they thinking this way? And really understanding traditions. And I believe that, you know, a lot of fear, a lot of anger that does stem from such vulnerable topic, it also comes from not understanding something fully, not having enough background and understanding, education on a certain topic. And that could cause fear, that can cause anger and resentment towards something. So educating oneself and educating your clients, whatever the case is, would also ease some tension, some guilt. Okay. And of course, so how can we support, you know, our ethnic clients, friends, and family? Like mentioned before, you know, research to learn about culture, history, implications of these factors, seek to understand on a less superficial level, and sincerely care about activism, you know, and not discriminate against other cultures and other ethnicities. You know, be your own social support your friends, support your family, support your clients. After all, we are one big community, and we are going through similar beliefs and thought processes and emotional roller coaster. And use your voice, talk about this. You know, this organization that, like, we're doing this right now, you know, talk about this within your other work field, within your practice. Talk to other individuals from other ethnic backgrounds, educate them. Education does go a long way. You know, be the social and the emotional support for your community. You know, if we don't support one another, how are we going to be heard? And one thing that I would like to point out is whenever the war broke out, our community, the Armenian community within the diaspora, it came together, like having that sense of unity. Again, not just during war times, like physical war times, but having it all the time, you know, especially during this hard time. Organizing groups within your work environment could also be another. Okay, and making an effort within this activist world, whether it's to sign petitions, whether it's to donate, whether it's to attend walks or marches, or you know, to send documents or requests to your government to, you know, sign certain petitions. Do your part and really encourage other minorities and other groups to do the same. And here we have listed some of the organizations and foundations, if you guys want to write them down. Excuse me, all of these organizations are project-based nonprofit organizations that contribute in having of course, all of these organizations are for different matters, but you know, these are all they've been present throughout the years and to fix certain things within Armenia. And you know, feel free to take pictures, research, and look into any of these organizations. And I want to reiterate, you know, you don't have to donate to make a difference. You can do everything else, whether it's sharing a certain post that somebody made on a professional platform, whether it's to talk about this to a foreign coworker or anything, you know. Okay. And, you know, the purpose of this organization is to, you know, talk about what's going on in Armenia and really support one another through this process. But Armenia is not the only country that's going through something so difficult. Like, there are many different issues worldwide, whether it's Nigeria, China, Congo. You know, there's so many third world countries that suffer from a lot of these things that are going unheard. Like, there's a lot of abuse that's going everywhere. There's a lot of discrimination, a lot of political corruption that's going on all throughout the world. And, you know, if we are doing our effort to make our voices be heard, it's also important to stand alongside our other, you know, non-Armenian brothers and sisters and really speak on this part. Okay. Monica, you want to add on to this one?
Sure. In terms of like our personal contribution to the cause, we wanted to throw this slide on there, which is something that we're not forcing you to do. It's totally up to you if you would like to go ahead and use the QR code. But what we did with a couple of grad students was come together to make Charms for Champs. And this was an organization that we put together where we made bracelets and pins and different things, and we sold them and we're still selling them. We've donated over about $5,000 to grassroots organizations in Armenia, like people who we know, who we trust, and we've given 100% of our profits. So despite the other things that we've been doing, despite the petitions and all these, you know, doing talks like this, no matter like what we've been doing, how busy we've been, this was something that we decided to do just to also speak on the idea of there's always something that you can do. And if, you know, you're not the one that wants to organize it, you can be the one that contributes by sharing it, by purchasing, by talking about it, by spreading it. So this was absolutely something that we were very proud of, that we were part of, and just wanted to mention that in terms of different ways that you can contribute to inspire you to do it, to inspire you to be part of it.
Oh, sorry. Well, thank you everyone for listening. And you know, if anyone has any questions, we can talk about this right now, or you feel free to reach us. And these are our emails. I'll leave that up for just another second there if anyone wants to write that down. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
If that's okay, we will leave the questions to the end.
Okay.
But
There we
thank
go.
you so much for your great presentation. Let me share my screen. Hello again, everyone. I'll also present on Armenian identity from the perspective of ethnic identity development and maintenance. So, what is ethnic identity? So let's get basically a sense of what is ethnic identity, and then we'll get to the issues around ethnic identity maintenance and Armenian identity specifically, and issues around ethnic identity that we are experiencing specifically after the war that happened in Artsakh and after that. Excuse me. Ethnic identity is a sense of a subjective sense of belonging, the way that we are connecting ourselves to other social groups. We are receiving that sense of belonging if it is a positive, basically, ethnic identity understanding. And if it is negative, then we may not have a strong sense of belonging to our ethnic identity. The ways that we can have strong ethnic identity, it's basically by having a shared history. And shared history, we need to have basically a understanding of our history. Our Armenian history has a few major identifiers that many Armenians, if you ask them what it means to be Armenian, they would probably say being the first Christian nation, experiencing the Armenian genocide. And then if you talk about more recent issues in the history, they may talk about the Spidak earthquake, they may talk about the Artsakh war, they may talk about immigration issues. And here I put a few flags here, and some of you may ask why we have these flags. And I wanted us to know that when we talk about an ethnic identity, the identity is not a closed concept that is not related to anything else. Many of us in diaspora, we have migrated from many different countries, not only from Armenia, but from Iran, from Lebanon, from Syria, and we have Armenians who are living in Russia, in France, and many, many other countries. So when a person thinks about their Armenian ethnic identity, in addition to knowing that they're Armenian, probably they think, okay, well, I have families, friends in Armenia, or maybe I have families and friends in Iran. Myself, I came from Iran, so I still have relatives in Iran. I think when I think about my identity, I'm thinking about, well, I'm Armenian, I live in US, but then I also have memories and relatives in Iran. So when we think about ethnic identity, we need to consider that it's complex. It includes multiple aspects. Some other aspects of ethnic identity, of course, for us, we have the language, the Armenian language. It keeps us together. It's another identifier of our ethnic identity. And our culture, which broadly defined, it includes everything else that I'm talking about, but more specifically, religious beliefs, our value system, the way we understand the things that are behaviors that are positive, that are acceptable, they're not acceptable, the values in our home environment, in the family roles that we take, the father's roles, mother's roles, children's roles, grandparents' roles, and things like that. So what we know from our cognitive development, when children basically get to years of 6, 7 years old, they kind of start to understand about the concept of society, concept of different groups. And that's when they are starting to understand which group they do belong in. And they can learn about their ethnic group from their parents, from their peers, from media. And then the one thing that is eventually does happen in regard to ethnic identity development is that people understand that which group they do belong and which group they don't belong. So, and that makes a difference. And then how they understand their in-group and how they understand the out-group. So ethnic identity can be a protective factor, and it may also have some risk factors. So the protective factors, if we have a positive sense of ethnic identity, if we are feeling good about our being an Armenian, the positive factors that have been also researched, not for Armenians, or there are some research studies for Armenians as well, but with many other groups, it has shown that positive ethnic identity, it brings psychological positive outcomes, a sense of resiliency. People feel good about themselves. They have high self-esteem. They have optimism. They have a better coping skills. Specifically for immigrants, that ethnic identity may be even more relevant because immigrants, they move from let's say Armenia or maybe other countries like Iran or Lebanon, that they come to another country. What they bring with themselves, besides maybe as the basic what image that comes from the old immigration pictures, you take your luggages and then come from the airport. But besides that, you bring your sense of who you are, your sense of identity, and that can help you to either thrive and resist or overcome the challenges of immigration. Or if you don't have that strong sense of identity, then you may actually not be as resilient. A positive sense of identity, it also gives us meaning. We will understand who we are. We can make sense of our world, our society, our place in the society in comparison to other groups and to our roots. And basically what happens is that a positive sense of identity can help us to have a positive narrative about our history and future. There have been many studies that they have done on people who are depressed and people who are not depressed. If you ask them about their life, people who are depressed, the way they explain about their life, it has more negative experiences, more negative stories compared to people who are not depressed. When you ask about their past, they are looking more of a positive side of their past. They have, even if they have experienced same type of childhood or past, people who are depressed, they focus on more the negative side. So similarly, if we have a positive ethnic identity, that will help us to look back and to see our history from a more positive point of view. And also, future is also something that we can create. If we have a positive sense of identity, we can create a more positive future for ourselves. And if we don't have that, then the future for us will not look good, because we cannot create a future from an identity that is not strong and is not positive. And a positive ethnic identity also can bring resources through the ways of social support. If we do feel like we are proud and we are feeling good about us feeling Armenian, then it's more likely we connect to other Armenians and to know that we have support. We can go to them if we need help, and that can help us to also overcome many of the stressful situations that we may experience. But also, ethnic identity has some risk factors. People who don't have a strong ethnic identity, Armenian in this case, or other ethnic identities, the research shows that they feel anxious. They don't know who they are. Specifically in countries outside of Armenia, that Armenians are not the dominant culture. They may feel lost, and that can create, exacerbate the mental health issues to lead to anxiety, depression, and situations such as loneliness. So how does ethnic identity develops? So we know that it starts in adolescence. There are some theories specifically in regard to where Armenians or ethnic groups are in minority, like in US or in other places in diaspora, adolescents, children, they start thinking about, they're comparing themselves to others. First, it starts with a situation which is not examined. People are not very aware what does it mean to be Armenian, and what does it mean to be American or from other countries. Like in Iran, you feel like what's Armenian, what's a Persian, what is a Syrian, what is in Lebanon. You just compare yourself, start to understand what does all this mean. And after you start examining, then you start gaining that knowledge. You're shaping who you are. You are starting, oh, that is what it means to be Armenian. This is our alphabet. This is our history. We are like the Christian nation, first Christian nation, the genocide, the Armenia, and all of these things. And then we get to a place where we have achieved ethnic identity. That's where, and maybe I should, that's ethnic identity. I've gone to the, or can you see it? So that's, we get to a place where we have the achieved ethnic identity, which is, if we get to a positive achieved ethnic identity, that can be a protective factor, but not many people get to this place. Again, specifically in countries where Armenians are minorities, and if there is a racism and stereotyping, they see minority groups as not valued members of the society, then individuals may feel that tension. They may feel that negativity that coming from the general public. And for some people, ethnic identity may not be even important because of their connection to their social group, ethnic group, and we should also consider that it's not for everyone that they basically thinking about their ethnic identity. And for countries where Armenians are in the dominant group, dominant culture, like in Armenia, their ethnic identity development will be a little bit different. There are not many research studies done on this idea that how it shapes, because there is not much comparison for members to other groups, because they're not closely involved with other groups until they become more adults and later on in after the teenage years. And some of the issues that we also want to consider for people who are in the Armenians who are in the dominant cultures, or in also countries that they may not be the dominant, but they also may ask this question about accepting other groups. Also, sometimes, unfortunately, there may be racism, comparing themselves in a more better view, and seeing other groups in a lower way and value them less. And then the positive part of it would be collaboration. Are they collaborating with other groups? So that's important to have that place to be able to collaborate. And one other thing we also need to consider is that ethnic identity is only one piece of the puzzle of all of the identities that we have. And we need to also consider these other things like gender. Men may look themselves different in Armenian culture than women. Sexuality, ability, disability, religion, and all of these other things, they play a role on the piece that makes our identity in general. So how do we maintain our identity? So if it's valued, if we are proud of our identity, it provides us a sense of comfort. It helps us. But if it's not a sense of, if it's not valued by the dominant culture and by ourselves, then we may go through a different strategies to try to maintain that identity. The first one that research studies has shown that some people do is that they say that those negative things that they talk about the Armenians, they don't apply to me. I'm not like those Armenians. I'm different. I'm positive. And then if that doesn't work, then some people take actions. They try to change from inside of the group. If there is something negative, there is something that doesn't work, they'll try to change by taking actions, social actions, political actions, educating, raising awareness, and things like that. Some people, if they feel the negativity or they don't value their culture, see it comes from the dominant culture, we use them negatively, they focus on the positive. They see what is in our history, in our religion, in art, or people that we have in our community, and find something positive to keep their self-esteem high. And unfortunately, the last option is changing membership. We see people who don't see that dominant culture is valuing themselves, and they don't value themselves. They say, okay, well, this is not for me. I may not identify myself as an Armenian anymore. So these are the different, basically, actions that people take. So for the sake of time, I'll go a little bit quicker. But in regard to the war that we experienced in Artsakh, we have the idea of trauma, which is also related to identity. And the way it's related to identity is that trauma is something that shatters our sense of self. It shatters the sense of worth, and it shatters the sense of future. We don't see ourselves as that coherent and strong anymore after trauma. We don't see the world being a safe place, and we see the future as doomed. So those are the negative issues in regard to trauma. And the things that people can do, and I think some of it that was in Zhanna's and Monica's presentation, which are basically taking actions, like volunteering, things that Zhanna's and Monica's team are doing, like making those pins, and or other people I heard, and myself and many of our community members, I know they were very involved to do volunteering, because that helps us to feel good about ourselves. Not just feel good, but actually trying to maintain a positive sense of identity, to not feel like 10 years from now and say, okay, well, I could have done something, I didn't. So we take actions to make sure we do things that we can to keep that positive identity. So other things that do happen during war and intergenerational trauma that exasperates the trauma that happens in the war is that this is related to the idea of that sense of self being shattered. First, we go through this process of grief. First, it's a disbelief that we can't accept that this is happening. Then we go to the stage of anger. We become very angry that why this is happening to us. It cannot happen. We don't want it to happen. And then people go, I mean, of course, this is not go step by step. Sometimes it moves back and forth to different stages, but this is just a general model of how do we handle loss and grief and processing of grief. And then we negotiate with the universe, with ourselves. It's like, okay, well, I'll be a better person. Hopefully, if I am a better person, then this bad thing will go away. And maybe if I do this good thing to people, or if I do some kind of negotiation with God, with universe, then this bad thing will go away. And then after negotiation, there is sadness. That is the processing, basically, of the loss. That is almost the final processing, the emotional processing. And then we have the acceptance, which is the time where when we do accept the reality, and then depending on if that impacts us or not, our identity, then we will get a new sense of identity. So a new sense of identity, how can we make it? How can, like, there were many questions, the people we've been working with in mental health and our colleagues in Armenia, community members, there were some sense of despair. There were some sense of disappointment after this war. And if we have that, then how can we create a new sense of identity that is positive? First, we need to find hope, and finding hope is it can be created in many ways. And for me, is that first is to accepting the reality, to be grateful what we have, rather than to looking at what we don't have or what we have lost. There is a time to process loss and grieve for our losses, but we accept where we are. And not accepting doesn't mean to give up what is ours. Accepting means that to know where we are and start from there, and knowing that we have power. We can change things that it's in our control. And by doing that, we make meaning. We look for new ways of making sense of our life. Who are we? What are we doing in this life? What does it mean to be Armenian after the war in Artsakh? And that if we can create a positive, a strong sense of meaning, we can have that more positive protective factor of the identity. And then finding a sense of belonging through social connection, to connect people who are strong, who are helpful, to also to people who are not feeling well or not feeling strong, but to help them. And that can also help us as well, helping both people who are not feeling well or not feeling strong, but also connect to people who are strong. And then the other things that also we need to consider, and this is my last point, and then we can go to discussions and some questions, is that we also need to know how a new identity is created. And one of the things that is, right now mostly is created through media. In the past, identity was created by just people talking to each other, but now people are getting their information and they interact through technology and online information and TVs, radio, newspapers. And we want to, for people who are journalists, people who are influencers, we need to be aware that what kind of messages are we sending to our community members? Are we sending a positive message that they are okay, like creating a new sense of Armenian identity, or are we sending a negative message? And that can be something to pay attention to when we're trying to create a new identity. And finally, just going back to our basic or important original learning models, we learn things. We learn about identity, and learning can be through positive or negative experiences. If we can provide more positive experiences and emphasize those things, making sure to identify and acknowledge people in our communities that they're doing great things, and help other people to see them, to know that we can be proud because we have all these great things that are happening. People are doing things, actions, things that are happening in our communities, and that can help us to create that sense of positive identity. And of course, unfortunately, the negative can be true. If people see negative things are happening, that can also impact them in a negative way. And finally, we have the social learning model of learning, which is the idea of like people, by knowing other people and learning, observing them, they learn about new ways of being. And if we can provide those models for people who we interact with, and to also to be aware more of a larger scale social context, people who are in charge of cultural influencers, so to speak, they can also have this a sense of idea to provide a more positive role model for others to create a new identity. So with that, I'll stop my screen, and we have 5 minutes, and I don't know if we have questions or not. I was not able to check the social media accounts, but if we have anything, Emmy, can you forward it to us? But if not, we can maybe just share final thoughts. Myself, I mean, I'm so passionate about this idea about ethnic identity. I know I'm teaching cultural social classes, psychological classes in our university, California School of Professional Psychology Alliance, and I know how important it is to have the positive sense of ethnic identity that can help us to overcome issues in our life and reduce stress, cope better with stress. And I also liked your idea about your topic, to talking about the guilt, diasporan guilt. That is a major issue in our community, and people definitely try to know what to do with that, how to overcome guilt. And you did mention about like a few things: advocacy, helping, contributing. I wonder if you have other thoughts, if you want to share any last thoughts or ideas. Please go ahead.
I think personally, like one of the takeaways that I want from this presentation to be is just the idea that even though it feels like there's nothing to do, even though it feels like your voice is unheard, even though it can feel like we're not getting anywhere, it's important to just keep fighting, to just keep trying and try and figure out ways to do these things, especially if you feel like there's nothing to do. I encourage everyone to try and figure out something to do and just spread that awareness, and eventually we'll get the ball rolling, and with more people having the same energy, we'll be able to get somewhere, and I wholeheartedly believe in that.
Beautifully said. Yeah, good point.
And I would like to also add that, regardless of everything that's going on in the world, and as difficult as it may be to be aware of that in the moment, is being proud of who you are, whether you're Armenian, whether you are from any other culture and ethnicity and race. It's important to be mindful and to be proud of who you are, where you come from, your roots, and just like I said, educate on know your career. I mean, I'm sorry, know your culture, and with our culture, like being aware of like it's so rich. Like there's so many things that makes us who we are, and just be proud of that and really using that to your benefit. And that's also a positive way of shifting and thinking about that. So
Wonderfully said. Yeah, education, raising awareness is a great step, and then also just wanting to do something, and that it can also be very helpful. So with that, I want to thank you both and for doing this presentation with me. I appreciate your work, and thank you our Armenian American Mental Health Association members who helped us with this conference, with this presentation, and with this conference yesterday and today. And thank you all the viewers in our Facebook Live and other places that you watch this. Thank you again, and have a good evening. Bye, everyone.